Now, the Dillon Quirke Foundation was set up in honour of the late Dillon Quirke, who collapsed and died of sudden adult death syndrome last August, 5th of August 2022, of course, in Semple Stadium, Thurles. Many of you will remember where you were when you heard that news. He was playing for hurling for his club, Clonalty Rossmore, in the Tipperary Championship. Sudden adult death syndrome takes 100 young lives in Ireland every year. Their aim is to raise awareness and save lives by screening every GAA player, both male and female, from the age of 12 onwards. The foundation has raised nearly 88,000, was at 30,000 when the Irish Examiner reported this story on December 18th. There's going to be a fundraiser when Tipperary play Kilkenny on Sunday, February the 19th, with proceeds going towards the screening process. The initiative also being backed by local politicians, of course, in the county. Delighted to say the former Irish international Niall Quinn joins us in the studio. Morning, Niall. And Dillon Quirke's father as well, Dan. Dan, pleasure to have you in.
Morning,
and I know it's not an easy subject to speak about. We might actually just kick this off by bringing you a clip, because we had John O'Keefe and Jimmy Maher, two of Dillon's teammates, on the show last year. I think it was October maybe, when we decided to come in and pay tribute to Dillon and talk about his life. So we don't have a clip, but they actually spoke eloquently about, I suppose, Dillon's age and how he exceeded his age in terms of the maturity and the type of person he was. He was that. I think Jimmy went on to say things like, he was always watching what the lads were eating in the house and always trying to get them out to the gym. He was a leader in many ways, Dan, I think it's fair to say.
He was, Shane, yeah, he was. From the day he could walk, he had a hurling in his hand. We used to be out day and night hurling. It's all about hurling with Dillon from a very young age. As he went through the years, he captained many of his club teams and onto the county, and he always looked after other people. His things, even with his training, he trained to the best of his ability, but made sure all his own teammates would do the very same thing. That was Dillon.
And a leader on the pitch as well, because the success that Clonalty Rossmore had in the recent years were very much centred through him. I know he was a modest lad as well, by all accounts, but
he was. Look, he played a big part. He won the senior final in 2018. He was centre forward the same year, and had a great year and a great final, and that was his greatest moment. He'd always said to me, whatever hurling he did and whatever he did in his life, he'll never forget that day in Semple Stadium to win a county final, which is a great feat for any young fella growing up. You want to start with your club, and you'll start with your club and finish with your club, and he loved it. He just loved every bit of it.
It's funny, because all the stories that came out about him afterwards, and I think everyone in the country remembers, as we say, where they were when they heard that terrible news. And it was just the fact that he was in the prime of his life, and it was in Semple Stadium as well. Just the irony, the cruel irony of it all struck a lot of people.
Yeah, it did. It's like, for us, what we've gone through over the last number of months, obviously it's been horrendous, but we've got great support from the local communities, from the GA clubs in Tipperary and all over the country, and that's why, I suppose, looking for some solace, we decided to start the foundation, and it's just gone from strength to strength, and we're blown away with the support we've got. It's been amazing, and I know Dillon would love us to be doing this, and we think we can achieve quite a bit in the not too distant future.
You've got involved as well, Niall. I know you've Tipperary hurling running through your blood, quite literally. Your father Billy Rahilty was the club.
Yeah, he played Rahilty. He played with Tip for a few years. Had to go off to London looking for work as a young lad, so gave up his career. But his anniversary was 7 years yesterday, so I think he'd be delighted too that I'm in giving Dan and the lads a bit of a dig out for Dillon, and it's very touching, and it's really tough looking back at Dillon, because Dan, used to tell me a few years ago, he's getting asked to go in and train with the Tip minors, what will we say to him? And do you remember that time, Dan? Yeah. And then on to the next one, God, he's in with senior training tonight. And so the whole thing built up, and we were all very proud of Dillon. And of course, his maturity, as you speak about, he was a standout player from a very early point in his introduction to the senior county team. And my last chat with Dillon was down at the golf in Adair that JP McManus invited me to play in, and Dillon walked around, and I played a shot one time, and it wasn't a great shot, and I remember him just saying to me, "Quinn, how did you get on this golf trip?" So he was funny like that, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
And Nick Faldo started laughing, and I told Nick what he was and the great player he was and what he was doing, and if they get to the final this year, there could be over 80,000 at the match. And Sir Nick said, "All right, and how much do them lads get paid?" And I was like, nothing. He went, "Oh God," he said, "that's not good." So there was a lovely little moment between us all there, It
was the love of it from. There was a great line from Timmy Hammersley, his teammate, the last message he had from him, when he said, "I just can't wait for Friday to come under lights in Thurles in the summer. Where else would you want to be?"
Yeah,
that summed them up.
It did, yeah. Sure, look, he had a great year this year with Tipperary. He played every minute of the championship with him, and he changed. I saw a lot of changes in Dillon in the last 12 months, particularly when he got his chance in the half-back line. He grew to be a great guy, really, and he was loving every minute. Then back with the club, his uncle now, Declan Ryan, who was involved in the foundation as well, Declan made him captain, and he was so proud of that, and he really thought this was our year, we'd win another county final, and we wouldn't have been too far away. We just were unfortunate with injuries and stuff, we lost Timmy went to Dublin, and it was a bit unfortunate. We were beaten in the quarter-final by Killydangan. We had a guy sent off and a couple of more guys to injuries, but we were thereabouts. He'd been so proud the way our guys turned up after he passed, and we had great comradeship with Kilwan McDonough's, the team that we played against when Dillon passed, and they've been exceptional since. Actually, they have their victory dinner dance next weekend, and Hazel and myself are going up. But look, Dillon, he enjoyed all aspects of life, not just hurling. He joined us in the business a couple of years ago, and he loved to crack in the business. We have a delicatessen business, and it's all fun with Dillon. Morning till night was fun, playing tricks on his mum and tricks on me, and that's all. It was all Dillon.
Hardly working. Yeah. It's funny, and I think that was one of the items at the funeral as well. The apron from
that's right.
The red helmet and things like that. I hadn't even realised that Dillon was born premature.
He was born 6 weeks premature. Hazel had a bad accident, and he had a couple of tough years early. He wasn't good to sleep, which didn't make it easy, but he came through that he got myocarditis in 2018, and he was very sick at the time now, and he gave up the sport for 6 or 8 months. But he came back, and we thought everything was going well. He was being screened, not being screened. He had screening done, and everything seemed to be fine. And he got heart checks, and everything was fine. And while this year, where he played with Tip, when the pressure was its greatest for 6 weeks, when they played 4 championship matches, he was flying. And then back home with his club, and all of a sudden, this happens.
How was he in that first period when he wasn't able to play hurling, when he had to step away from sport?
Sure, he found it very difficult because he loved training, he loved going to the gym, and he loved running, and he loved playing hurling. He wasn't having it. He wanted to go back tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And Hazel, particularly, and Dillon, you've got to give this time. Eventually he did give it time, and we actually won another 21 county final the same year, and he missed the final because of it. But he actually came on for the last 60 seconds, and he shouldn't have had, but he just wanted to get on the field. That's all he wanted to do, was win something with his club. He loved it so much.
Man, we had I would have shared a dressing room with Brendan O'Duffy, the young Monaghan Harps lad, 19 years of age, killed in a road accident. We've had his father, Brendan O'Duffy, a senior, in here in the studio, and you've probably shared dressing rooms with people like this as well, Niall, because it was mad how the two sort of matched in my head, in that everyone said about Dillon and everyone said about Ogie that they were leaders, wise beyond their years in the dressing room. And sometimes in the dressing room you meet these types of lads who are maybe 10 years younger than you, but you look up to them in some ways.
Yeah, and they're not just doing it for themselves, they're bringing people with them. I think that's the kind of type of man that Dillon was, and it was obvious from a very early age when he started to get into minor teams that it wasn't just about him. He wasn't fazed by it. He wasn't looking around wondering if I'm going to make it. He was actually saying, I'm going to make this, and I'm going to bring a few lads with me, and we're going to have a great time. I think that attitude that the players like Dillon had, and no doubt Ogie had too. I can remember one of the players that passed from the Irish team, from all the setup, was Alan McLaughlin. And Alan came into the team in a really strange way. He arrived at the World Cup. He took Gary Waddock's place the night before the team had to go in. Gary had travelled to Italy. Gary had to go home to London, and Alan came in, and there was this kind of funny moment where you've got a player who's come in and your mate's gone back. Nobody knows this guy, and by probably lunchtime a couple of days later, we knew this fella's going to be great. He's great in the dressing room. He's a strong character, and he slotted in. So I see that kind. When I think back of Alan, I think about that time. I think of Dillon. The strengths players like that have in a dressing room, and the hold they have over you. And then when you think about them now that they've passed, Dillon being so young, Alan had his career. I mean, he died a young man, but he had his career, his full career. Dillon didn't have the full career. So you think all the time, you think what they could have achieved. But I because I knew Dillon separately, it was his wit. Like Dan says, he tried to play a few jokes and different things. I mean, he really was an absolute character, and you could do nothing but just love the fella. Big smile on his face, make you laugh, had a quip. And they're the kind of people you jump out of bed every day to speak to and to get to know.
Yourself and Dillon were obviously incredibly close through the hurling, through work, so you would have seen a lot of each other, but I'm sure you heard a lot of that, what Niall's saying, actually, the other part of his life when he'd be away with the lads, the stories, the things he would have got up to that you probably had never heard of before.
No. Like, we actually went to the New Zealand in 2017 with the Lions for 3 weeks. It was a brilliant trip to have with your son, but we got friendly with 5 Rangers supporters, were Scottish guys, and they were in their 70s. And Dillon was infatuated by the 5 guys. And he was 18 and these guys were in their 70s. But the banter we had with them, and they loved him. They absolutely loved it. It's just funny, he could mix whether you were 8 or 80. It didn't make a difference. That was Dillon, you know. And he didn't like plaudits from the sporting. That wasn't his thing. He didn't like any plaudits. He just wanted to do his job and help others. You know, that's the way he was.
Was Jimmy, just when you're speaking there, did Jimmy have a story about Dillon on a skiing trip or something, or there was some trip he was on and I think he went missing or something? He had a couple of drinks and rang his mother.
That's right. Yeah, he went missing, and himself and Aaron, a friend of his, they were the first night skiing. They said to take a shortcut home after the night out through the snow instead of following the streets or whatever, and they got stuck in the snow and lucky to get back home. But when they eventually got home, Aaron and Dillon were frozen, literally frozen. They put him into the bath, and it was good for girls. Please ring Mammy. I want my Mammy. 23 years of age.
I was going to ask what age was he?
What did Mammy say when
Mammy loved that. She loved that.
Mommy's boy.
Mammy's boy. Actually, she's been great to him, you know, because everything revolved around Dillon when we were having breakfast, lunch, and teas. Whatever Dillon wanted, we'd have, you know. So Hazel had been great to him. He was as good as he was because his mother made a great job, and I might say, you know. Yeah. As a mum, like.
I'm sure the both of you did a great job. Clearly did, and that's the other thing as well, that as Brendan O'Duffy talked about the grief process and how there is no right or wrong way to go about it, and I can't even begin to imagine what yourself and Shannon and Kelly and the whole family have had to go through, and it's still very recent. But how have you managed to cope over the recent months? I'm sure, like for Brendan Og, I guess the book that he wrote about Ogie, you know, kept him occupied. For yourself, even this charity is something to keep the mind occupied. But how have you found the last months?
It's very hard to explain it, Shane. It's 5 months now, and it's not getting easier yet. We still believe he's going to come back. You wake up in the morning or at night, you feel he's going to come in at any time, but he's not. But I think as a family, we're obviously so proud of Dillon, but we've had 24 wonderful years, and we're really grateful for that. And if we could have a legacy for Dillon now, is that we'll save lives, and that's what we're doing with the foundation, and that's the solace for us as a family. That's how we get our solace, and we know we'll save lives, which is great. That's what keeps us going.
The way the community is rallied around, like you talk about the connection with Kilruane that's still there, the Tipperary hurling community, the Munster hurling community, the Irish GAA community as well. I'm sure that gives you a lot of strength as well, that so many people have actually been so shocked by this, so affected by it, that they want to come around and support you and show that actually Dillon meant an awful lot.
Yeah, we're getting it from all over the country. I think last week UCC played Quirk, and Tom Kingston, who was the UCC manager, I played against Tom as a minor, and part of the gate receipts were put to the foundation. And we're getting this from Wexford, from Northern Ireland, from clubs and counties all over. It's been incredible. And it's just, we've got momentum now, and we're really taking off. And if we can keep this going, who knows where it will end. But at least we know that we're going to save lives. And Niall will tell you a little bit more there about different federations and different countries.
Yeah, I suppose, you know, the SADS problem came up before now, and in other countries they responded and reacted quicker. In Italy, for instance, 25 years ago, a real good effort was put in by the government to screen all young sports people, and here we are 25 years later, 89% reduction in SADS deaths, you know.
Nice, right.
So it's obvious, but it's kind of not, because lots of people, parents, their children play sport, they're delighted, but they don't actually ever maybe take the time to stop and say, just wouldn't mind getting him checked now. And there's so many people playing sports, the GAA, you know, as well, the FAI, and Brendan O'Carroll got involved in this as well and saw the problem too a couple of years ago. And I think all of us who have children who are playing would actually stop and think, you know what, I should really do this and get my children checked. And what what Dan and Hazel and the family are putting together here is a really good, efficient way to get as many young people tested in sport, in the GAA as we know. In the first instance, please God, it might even go further than that, depending where fundraising goes. But to think, to do it without what Dan's doing. So the bottom line about this is, a truck will come in, a medical truck will come into a club. There will be times there for all of the club members to go in and get their check and their screen. And if the news is good 7-10 days later, that's great. If it's not so good, at least then the parent knows and something can happen and you're on a better road. When you try and get every parent to do that now in our world, you'd have to go to a doctor, you'd have to get an appointment, the doctor would have to give you a reference. There's a big sort of long drawn out effort to maybe get a child screened normally. And that's why what Dan is doing is short circuiting all that and bringing together medical expertise that will just put so many more people at ease, but also help the ones that do screen oddly, if you like, and stuff shows up. It's a wonderful way, I think, of satisfying all parents if it gets big enough. Numbers are numbers, but the idea that this foundation could maybe get up to €1 million, that would be 15,000 children, young adults checked. That will save lives. 100,000 will save lives, which will be sort of 10% of that would be 1,500, and so that's in fairness to Dan and the family, they're starting in the county, they're starting local, they're putting it together with a group AMS, a medical service team, and it's just win-win-win. There's no downside to this. Every parent, should look at doing this. And it's great that the GAA world spots it and are supporting him. Every day, Dan rings me and says, "You won't believe what happened today. Such and such has happened." And I think it's the fear maybe for Dan and the family was, how do we get it off the ground? How do we get it started? That fear is gone now because of the goodness that's out there already, knowing and trusting what the foundation is going to do. So now it's a matter of doing it, and it's great to come on and be given the airtime to tell people that it's here and it's for them. It's not for Dan. In theory, it is. It's for everybody out there. It's for the parents, and not to go through what they did. So, and for me, knowing Dillon the way I did all the years, and knowing Dan as long as I did, Dan is a very modest man as well. Dan scored 3 goals in an All-Ireland under-21 hurling final for Tipperary. He's going to kill me for mentioning
You're loving this, Dan. You're a dual player. He played big ball as well.
Well, he played a bit of big ball, but I think he was, when they used to just put the big lad up front and whack it into him. I think that's as much as the football.
You know all about it.
I know a lot about it. I had a career of it.
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah. Well, you say he was born with a hurl in his hand, Dillon, but there was no coincidence to that.
I don't know. I wouldn't say. Thanks for mentioning that, by the way. No, he was.
Afterwards there,
His uncle would be Declan Ryan, his uncle now.
Right, yeah.
Hazel, my wife, and Olive are twins, and Declan is Olive's his husband. But Declan was always hurling with Dillon as well, and he had it from a lot of angles, really, The club, and the former players that went through the club, John O'Keefe, Timmy, he looked up to all these guys. It was all hurling, yeah.
What a brilliant legacy, when it's so shocking to read 100 lives a year affected, 100 stories like your stories, and it's such a simple way to go out. It's an expensive way to go out, but actually to be able to bring it to clubs when kids go in at a young age, you'll never actually know the amount of people,
correct,
and the amount of lives that you save by this.
That's true, Nathan. It's great, and it does work, and it's for parents. If you're listening, it's for parents not to go through what we've gone through, because it's horrendous, and it does work. That's great.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff, because you think back even to 20 years ago now, Cormac McAnallen, or no, it's less even. But I mean, when people see the photographs, like Joe Hayes is a man I know you know well, Niall, a man I would have known from up in Monaghan as well. There was the great photo of the two of them, I think, on the pitch in 2018, maybe after the county final.
Right, yeah.
Smiling. If two men could be smiling anymore, I wouldn't want to see it.
Iconic photos.
It's unbelievable.
It is. And funny, was another great one. The logo for the foundation is the red helmet with Dillon holding the hurley.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen that picture, but how that was taken, it's incredible, because there's might be 100 heads and one hurley and a helmet sticking up. It's great,
It's amazing.
It is, and it's a lovely logo to have for the foundation, because everybody reacts.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about it, which is great.
The other thing as well, and Nathan, you touched on it, like the club and community, how everyone comes together at a moment like this. Like even I think John O'Keefe and Jimmy Maher spoke about finding out the news themselves. I think they might have all gone to the local church or whatever to kind of come together as a team, and news filtered through, of course, but everyone sticking together. It's one of those things I'm sure all of Dillon's friends and teammates now are part of your lives forever.
Oh, they are. That's it, absolutely. I mean, from the time he passed to 3 or 4 days around the time of the funeral, it was just incredible. It really was. Like, you'd be blown away by it. The crowds that turn up at the funeral, the different things people have done since and at the time, and the funeral itself was a beautiful funeral. And even we had the Munce Mine a month later. Niall was down for it.
Amazing.
It was on the J pitch, and there was thousands at it, which was just fabulous. It was everything was lovely, and the help we've got from our own chairman would be an uncle of Dillon's, Andrew Friday. Andrew's the local chairman. The work he's still doing is incredible, like. And it's all over the county. Everybody wants to help, and they're great. And we just need people to donate to the GoFundMe page, and that'll get us there.
100%. Well, listen, we'll be sure to share the GoFundMe page on our social channels and all the rest, and hopefully add to the push that you guys are doing. It's amazing work, and brave to come into us and have the conversation as well, like John and Jimmy did as well. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's a great thing to remember, Dillon. And listen, this foundation is a beautiful way to do it. So listen, Dan, Niall, thanks a million for
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very
both
much.
of you, both of you
Thank you,
coming in. Much appreciated. And listen, as I said, we'll share that GoFundMe link on the page as well.